Welcome, everybody. It's great to see you again. So many wonderful, familiar faces. So nice to have Richard Williams with us. It's a great honor, sir. And Walden will, I'm sure, throw some interesting questions at you. Our lineup tonight is a little bit different. We are going to do our program first, and then we will do the first 15 in the quiz. So, and then the business meeting. So without much further ado, Frank, I believe you said you wanted to do the formal introduction of
Yes.
Mr. Williams to us. So take it away, Frank.
Thank you. Everyone, our guest tonight is Richard Williams. As fans of old-time radio, we know him as Richard of the youthful group of geniuses, radio's Quiz Kids. Richard appeared in hundreds of episodes of the Quiz Kids. As a member of the Quiz Kids, he made multiple appearances on the Jack Benny and Fred Allen programs. Between 1940 and 1945, he and several other Quiz Kids performed in 38 cities around the country and helped to raise $120 million in war bond sales. In her 1982 book, Whatever Became of the Quiz Kids, Quiz Kid Ruth Duskin Feldman described Richard as, quote, regarded by many as the best all-around kid the Quiz Kids ever turned up. Richard was best known for his mathematical skills and geographic knowledge, but if you listen to the shows, you know he knew a lot more. But after the Quiz Kid, life did go on. Richard earned his Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Chicago, his Bachelor of Science degree from Purdue University, and his MBA from Harvard University. Richard, you know, it's really sad you didn't challenge yourself at all. Richard then served in the Army from 1953 to 1955. In 1956, Richard began his career in the Foreign Service, which continued until his retirement in 1994. And I think he'll tell us some of the stories about that tonight too, Richard, I hope. From 1994 through 2001, Richard taught graduate level China courses at Columbia University and at New York University. In 2005, he published his memoirs entitled At the Dawn of New China. Richard, we are grateful and honored to have you with us tonight. And also I want to thank Walden Hughes for twisting your arm to make it happen. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a
Walden,
pleasure.
I guess if you would.
Sounds good. Richard, when you were growing up as a kid, was there anything special about your education? Did your mom and dad do anything special about, outside school with your education? Talk about that part of your life as a kid.
Well, I started to read when I was 3 years old. And as a result, when I got into first grade, in kindergarten, I read to the other kids, and from first grade on, as long as they had reading courses, I didn't have to take them, and instead I stayed home and learned to play the piano. My parents did not do anything particular beyond all that.
Talk about your dad a little bit. If I remember right, wasn't he an engineer by trade? Your dad background a little bit.
My dad was an engineer. He then had with his brother and brother-in-law had a business in our town of East Chicago, Indiana, and it was oil. It was two parts. One was selling oil and one was selling oil burners, particularly industrial oil burners to the whole Chicago area, like to big buildings and factories and so forth.
So did he do anything special with your ability with math, or was that a God-given ability as a kid? Was there any special training in that part?
I would, in the morning, while he was shaving in the bathroom of our 2-bedroom bungalow, I would sit on the toilet and he would ask me first arithmetic take questions and sort of advance it to other things, just all as fun. But there was no special training beyond that.
So I'm assuming did school come really easy for you? Were you bored as a student because you were gifted in that?
No, I wasn't bored, but it was by the time I got to the third grade, my folks and the school decided that I should jump a little bit, and so I never went to 3A. I only went to the 3B, and then jumped into fourth grade, which like threw me into a different world, because the first 5 years I had been with like this family of the same grade school class, and then suddenly it was a new bunch, and arriving sort of at a new stage also in elementary education.
How did your family find out about the opportunity of you going on to Quiz Kids? How did that come about?
Well, Quiz Kids started on June 28th, 1940, as a summer replacement, a radio show for the Alec Templeton Hour. He was a blind pianist, as I recall. And then that fall, it was a big hit just as a summer replacement. So then on the fall, it went on permanent weekly broadcasts on Sundays. And early in that summer, one of the teachers at my grade school heard the program, and people were asked to send in names of kids who might be prospective competitors on the show, and a teacher sent in my name, and when that happened, they then asked her to come into their office at 8 South Michigan in Chicago, the Willoughby Towers, and facing the city park there, and they interviewed you and asked you questions, and if they liked you, they asked you to be on the show.
What kind of questions were they? Were they like the questions that we would have heard on the radio show, or were they just trying to see what your personality was like? What was that interview process like?
Well, they were factual questions, and the show had been inspired by some slightly earlier radio show called Information Please, that was adults, and the quizmaster was at Clifton Fadiman, and one of the regular contestants was Oscar Levant, if you remember him, and so this was a kid's version of that, which, however, and the man who thought it up whose name was Lou Cowan, changed it in that he made it into a competition. The Information Please had not been that, and the Quiz Kids was a competition where the 3 best scorers of each week went on to the next week, and then they asked 2 other kids to join, and so as long as you were in the top 3, you could go week after week, and then eventually you would lose, of course, and if they liked you, 2 or 3 months later, they'd ask you to come back and give you more and more chances like that. So that was the way it worked.
Did you ever hear of the show before you went on? Did you ever come across it just as a listener before you did the interview?
Yes, I did listen to it a little bit, because I mean, this all happened very quickly. The first show was June 28th, as I said, and I was on it the first time on September 4th, I think it was, and along about, I must have been late July, uh, when my teacher had sent uh, my name in, that I got the thing, and you filled out a questionnaire and mailed it back in, which we did uh, as we were going off for a couple weeks vacation or a week vacation at a fishing lake up in Wisconsin. And so it all happened very quickly. But I did hear the show in those, at least some of the time in those weeks.
So, what was the process like? Did your family get in the car to drive you to Chicago? What was a typical day like on broadcast day?
Yes, my East Chicago was about a 40-minute drive from downtown. The show was in the Merchandise Mart on the north edge of the Chicago River, south edge being the end of the loop. And so we would drive in there on the Sunday, and it being Sunday, there was a parking space right below the merchandise mart on the edge of the river that was always empty. And so we were parked there and went upstairs, and we're on the show, Studio E.
Mhm. Was Studio E a big studio? Some of the show has a nice sized audience. What show you remember about the layout of the Studio E?
Well, it seated, uh, I would say, probably a couple hundred people. And at the, and it was a sort of a slightly long rectangle, and we were at the at one of the short ends, and they had the 5 chairs faced arced around one corner up there, and the quizmaster Joe Kelly seated facing us across that end, and they asked the questions. He asked the questions.
Did so she got there? Did the kids
Whatever you want, yeah.
did the kids communicate with each other for a little bit before showtime, or were you guys? No, what did he have like a green room that you guys were sort of isolated? Did you guys get a chance to talk to each other a little bit before showtime? What was the
We
atmosphere?
talked just a little bit. There was no private
Don't
room
hear
that we
much
met in.
sound.
Mhm.
Pardon?
Um, so so did you get a chance to? Was Joe Kelly part of the interview process, or was the first time you talked to him with broadcast day that on September 4th?
That was the first time I talked to him. He was not part of the interview process. He came, he had been for a number of years on the National Barn Dance, a well-known Saturday night radio program at that time. And he too was from Indiana, downstate. And when they were creating the show in the early summer of 40, they tried different people for the quizmaster, and the ones who you would sort of naturally think of as possibilities that were like college professors or the Clifton Fadiman type, sort of cowed the children a little bit. And whereas Joe, with his very good-natured and forthcoming, friendly personality, calmed the kids down and made them very relaxed, and so they chose him.
So did kids have mic fright in those days, or were they? What was? the
No,
most.
we sat along a row in a row, and each of us had his own mic, and Joe Kelly would ask a question, and those who thought they knew the answer put their hand up, and he called on one of them to answer. And in fact, the first time I was on the show in that September, I did not make the top 5. And I had put my hand up a good many times, but I was shy and hardly put it up at all. And he didn't see it, sort of. And so I didn't get asked
Guess
for
they
questions.
muted everybody.
And so after, but the people who ran the show saw that I had my hand up a lot, so they asked me to come back a few weeks later, and that time I shot up.
You remember the first question you ever answered? Was it a math question? You have any idea what was the first question that you answered on the show?
I don't remember what the first questions were, but it was probably the people who ran the show knew what the specialties of the kids were, and so to that extent, you never knew what the questions would be, but this was like Information Please had been. If Oscar Levant were on the show, there would be a music question. If he wasn't on the show, they wouldn't have that, because he was the one who knew all about classical music. And in my case, it helped because they knew that I liked math and geography, and they knew just where I was in the math. So to that extent, I suppose it was dishonest. We didn't really think of it that way at all, but it was stacked in favor of the people who were on the show and knew the show well. Besides having your own specialty, for most of the show when I was on it, it was the Second World War. So there were always current events questions. And you knew if you'd been on the show for a while that almost all of them would be covered in Time magazine. So if you read Time magazine regularly, you had a big jump on the poor kids who were just coming new to the show and wouldn't have that clue. But it was legit within those rules.
The show, I'm assuming it was just one broadcast. You didn't have an East Coast, West Coast repeat, right? It was probably.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, during the war, the show was in Chicago about half the time, and that's when we were doing this competition 3 out of 5. The other half the time, the same team for almost the whole time of 4, we were traveling around the country all the time. And that was to do war bond programs. If you bought a ticket, if you wanted to, if the quiz kids were coming.
Yes. Go ahead, Richard.
Oh, hold on a second. Wendy, you muted Richard.
Yeah, if Mr. Williams can unmute.
There he is. He's back.
There, now
Hey, thank you. Everyone else, please mute yourselves so that Mr. Williams is not interrupted.
Oh, anyway, so in one city after another around the country, a local department store would co-sponsor the program for that. This show in general was commercialed by Alka-Seltzer, but for the local part, the local department store would do a lot of the preparation and so forth, including running a competition, which on the among local kids, which on the day of the program, or maybe it was the day before, they would run a local competition and pick a fifth person. So on that day, on the Sunday, then when we got there, that young kid would join the four of us and do that local broadcast. And the same four of us, Harvey Fishman, who became Harv Bennett, the movie producer, Ruthie Duskin, who and Joel Kupperman, who was the best known because he was the youngest for a long time and was brilliant. And who else was the fourth one? I'm running short. But anyway, that would, the same four of us, the team, went all around the country for the wartime, basically.
How was it traveling? Was it typically, would you guys be gone for a couple of weeks at a time? What was a typical road trip like during the war?
Travel was by train, and we would, well, it varied, but let me go back to an earlier stage for a minute, or maybe we can come back to the broadcast later. The first burst of enthusiasm for the Quiz Kids led to our making movie shorts. And for that, we went to New York. Paramount Studios still had a studio there. I think they'd been founded there before they went to Los Angeles. And they still made short subjects there. And so we would make about a half a dozen, enough material for about a half dozen short subjects, because in those days, movie houses, you may remember, you would have the main feature or double feature, and then you would have a newsreel, and then you would have another short subject on some feature or something or other, and we were making those things. Anyway, the first time we went was in January of 41, and when we went to we went to New York to make the movies, and we were ushered first down to the mayor's office, Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, when we got there, and then we made our movie shorts out in Queens, where the Paramount studio was. And then when we had done all that, we went on down to Washington, D.C., where we were received by Eleanor Roosevelt in the East Room of the White House. And then after that, we also went to Congress, where our congressman talked from the floor about us. I remember in particular, I think the Illinois senator was C. Wayland Brooks, and he praised all his kids who were from Illinois, and then my Indiana senator put his hand up and said, "There's one from Indiana, that's Richard Williams." So I got a special notice that way. And then So that was January. And then in the first flush of the novelty of the show and the enthusiasm of it, in April, we went to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, to be on the Jack Benny show, weekly show, which was on Sundays. And for that, we took trains. People weren't doing planes quite yet. And so we went for a couple of days on the city of Los Angeles. The train was called, and then when we got there, we did our rehearsals at Jack Benny's estate in Beverly Hills, and swam in his swimming pool, and then went to make the program. And it was the first program was something called the Quiz Kids versus the Jello Kids. And at this point, one of the boys in the group then was named Claude Brenner, and he was from South Africa originally, and as well as from England. But his mother had brought him and his sister to the States for a little while. It was supposed to be a year, but then the war came in Europe, so they were stuck in the US. Anyway, Claude gave a very erudite and clipped British-style English answer to a question about classical music, some very obscure thing. And Jack Benny, he was the quiz master, he said, "That's right, one for the quiz kids." And then he asked the corresponding question to a member of the Jello Kids, which in this case was his band leader, Phil Harris. And he said, "Now, Phil Harris, if I play music very loud, what's that called?" And Harris said, "Fortissimo, kid, top that." And Jack Benny then said, "That's one for the quiz kids, one," and went on. That was the way the program went. A contest in which the quizmaster was somewhat prejudiced, and it was appreciated a lot. So that in the end, we stayed for 3 weeks, and we were on his program the 2 successive weeks, which gave us the chance to go out and visit the movie studios and a lot of movie stars. There was one occasion on which Jane Withers, the child star, when we went out to, I think it was to Paramount that time, they had a little informal party, and she led a conga line. Cooey, cooey, conga, cooey, cooey, conga. And we had been in Chicago and said not ever been exposed to that before, but we got in line and enjoyed it. And so that segment was before the war had begun. It was still in early 41. And so it was a different scene than once the war had begun.
I know I have
Where
a
was I?
broadcast. I have a special when you guys were visiting Walt Disney Studio on that trip in 41. They did a special broadcast.
Yes. We we visited Disney Studios. I don't remember that it was a special broadcast, but we met a lot of movie stars at that time. I still have the autograph collection with people like Judy Garland and I can't, a whole book full of them, and Walt Disney, and his the guys who were in Wizard of Oz, who were Mr. Woodman, the Tin Woodman, Jack Haley, and I forget offhand what the names of the other ones were, but a whole collection.
During the war,
Bert Lahr was probably the Cowardly Lion, I think.
yeah.
Pardon?
I believe Bert Lahr was the Cowardly Lion.
Right.
Oh, yes, right.
So during the war,
I don't think we met. I'm sorry?
During the war, Richard, when you would go to a city, did they have you do special event trying to sell bonds besides the radio show, or what was it? Was there anything special about the day of the broadcast when you were in a different city? You know, doing the war bond sales.
They I guess I said that they charged a war bond. You had to buy a war bond to get into the show itself, but we did not do more than that, except maybe there might have been like a lunch at the sponsoring department store. Maybe they sold admittance to that. I really don't remember clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But we would just arrive, we'd get into the town on a Friday night or something, and then the show was on Sunday, and we would promptly get and get back on the train the next day.
Okay, Frank and Wendy, I think let's go ahead and open it up to the audience. They want to ask Richard questions. We could always drop more in, but
Okay.
special
Richard,
time.
I have a question. You mentioned that you listened to the show before you went on to the show. I know sometimes when I'm watching Jeopardy, I can answer questions. When you were listening to the show before you went on, did you feel, hey, I can answer all these questions? And, did you feel confident when you showed up there?
I didn't feel I could answer all these questions, but I didn't have a confidence problem. It just was much plainer than that. I mean, I just focused. No, I didn't have a problem particularly.
Also, the kids who could be on the show could be anywhere between 5 and 16. Wasn't that the range?
Yes.
Oh my God.
That was the range, and that caused quite a change after the war. To digress for a minute, on the radio show, yes, you could be anything up to when it was your 16th birthday, you couldn't be on anymore. You could be anything up to that. But on the radio show, usually there would be two really little kids, like maybe 6 and 8 or 7, and somewhere in there. And then along with that, there would be 3 older kids in their early teens, before their 16th birthday. And that was fine on radio. But when they moved to TV in the years just after the war, by which time I was 16 and off, these on TV, 15-year-old kids don't look like little kids anymore. And so they responded to that. This is I don't think I've ever heard anybody else express this view, but anyway, they therefore, to make it look good on TV, make it look like these were kids, they reduced the age so that there was seldom anybody under about 12, over about 12. And the result was that dumbed down the show considerably. And it was stemmed only for a lot of it by the boy named Joel Kupperman, who had started when he was 5, and by this, in the years after the war, he was still around for several years. And so they tolerated having one older boy who was very good, and he answered a lot of the questions. But the upshot was, well, I might say that for those of us who were on the show a lot, once we got off the show over age, there was, we all felt some variety of what in the trade is known as child star letdown. And but we remembered the show very fondly. We had enjoyed it. But it was just, then you had something you felt you had to live up to and didn't know how to do that. And but Joel, who went through this longer period and in this odd period when he was the only older kid, so he would have had no companionship with the other kids on the show, he ended up very bitter and said that it was also partly caused by his very driven mother, but at any rate, he felt that his childhood had been robbed from him from the quiz. So that was a really sad life to live through.
Well, Richard, you all came out millionaires, right, as a result of being on the program?
Well, we all, not exactly millionaires, although the money we earned by the time you inflate it today's dollars would make us millionaires, and which certainly was comfortable for us. Every week that you were on the show, they gave you $100 war bond, actually worth $75 when it was bought. And if you kept it for the full 10 years, as most of us did, then you got the $100. And at the end of the 5 years that I was on it, I had been on the show for, I think, 212 times or something like that. So that was a very nice sum of money for those days. And my family would have been able to pay for college anyway, but it certainly was a comfortable cushion. And you deposited it and invested it, and it is a piece still there of whatever I have now.
Was there a problem of camaraderie when you had these older kids and someone as young as Joel mixing together? I mean, was there camaraderie on the air and then not when you were do other things?
Well, Harv Bennett and I he was 8 months younger than me, and we were buddies, because that was close, and we would enjoy whatever town what we were.
Can you tell us, Richard, a little bit about your career with the Foreign Service?
Oh, sure. It took me some time to get there. When I got out of college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I took some aptitude tests and from a company in Chicago, and they found that I had too many aptitudes, they said, and for people like that, they recommended two things. One was show business and the other was architecture. And I had already been in show business and didn't want any more. And so I went to University of Pennsylvania architecture school for a semester. But unfortunately, it caused a substantial and quick deterioration of my vision. And because you had to spend, at least for the first year, about 20 hours a week over the drafting board. And so I had no choice but to give up on the architecture. And then I also had my father had and uncles had a business that I thought I might join. But anyway, first, the architecture ended so suddenly that mid-year that I just went to my easiest option, which was to go to Purdue and get an engineering degree like my father and brother had gotten, and finished that. And then all with the idea that maybe I'd join them in the family business. But when I got through, I wasn't sure. So I went on to take a business degree at an MBA at Harvard, figuring that because by this time I thought maybe I want to try the foreign service first and just see if I might like that better, because the thought of going back to the old hometown was not exactly exhilarating. And so I thought, well, the Harvard Business School can do for either of those, and went there. And at the end of those 2 years, I had, let me see how it went. Oh, I had passed the Foreign Service exam, which is given once a year around the country. And
tonight, a twisted tragedy in Iowa, where 2 teens are accused of killing their Spanish teacher.
Yes, then there was a twisted tragedy in Iowa. And so I had to change my plans. And I went, anyway, where was I? Oh, I thought I would go immediately into the Foreign Service and try it, because I was, for one thing, that exempted you from the draft. Not that that was the reason for going there, but it was true that if you joined the State Department, you did not have to serve in the draft. So I turned down the offer of a commission that you could get after the business school, and waited for the State Department to call me up. But you know how strange life is, how small things transform your life, like the founding of the Quiz Kids in Chicago. And now at this point, the new President Eisenhower froze the draft and froze federal hiring, because he wanted to look at the federal budget and all that, which delayed my being taken into the State Department by about 8 months. After about 6 months, at which point my local draft board, which had been cooperative, said they couldn't defer me anymore. So I got drafted for 2 years. And then I went into the State Department finally in 1956. But the upshot of by this time, if this is more complicated than you care to, just stop me. But the State had been in several pieces, and I had joined the political and economic officers. But it happened that while I was drafted, the State Department was integrated, and meaning that what had been a whole series of different silos had been merged, and that included not only political, economic, but also the administrative and the consular, meaning visa issuance, and a lot of jobs in Washington in the State Department. And so by the time I got out, that had taken place. And instead of getting into the political economic group, I was assigned because of my master's in business from Harvard. I was assigned to the Department of Budget in the State Department for my first couple of years, which was later that was taken out because it was so irrelevant to the rest of the Foreign Service. So anyway, it's all not a very good beginning. And the upshot was then I had a consular assignment at Hong Kong, assigning, issuing visas. And that wasn't too inspiring either, but that was where I met my wife, who was Chinese, and she was my Mandarin teacher. And so then after all that, I came back to the US and joined my family business for a couple of years. And then my family business had trouble. Then I worked for several years at Commonwealth Edison, the electric utility in Chicago. And then after all that, I came back to the State Department, and a little late for to really get fitted in the right way, but it all then went on, and I eventually got good assignments and so forth. So it was an okay ending, good ending.
Yeah, you were under President Reagan's administration. Where were you assigned?
Under President Reagan's administration, I wonder if I have the picture here.
I'll look at it.
My son's going to get the picture off the wall. That was when I got my ambassadorship to Mongolia. And when you get an ambassadorship, you're the representative of the president. So you go to the White House and meet him, and are officially signed in, and you have your picture taken. And here we are. I don't know how well you can see that.
Yes, right there. Excellent.
While I'm at it, I will also show you the other unique honor that I received during the Quiz Kids years, when we were, those of us who were on very much, were made into paper dolls. Here we are.
Hold it up a little higher. There you go. Excellent.
That's me. Not many people get that.
No.
So
What made you decide to write your book in 2005?
My other sort of major assignment during my Foreign Service years was when we opened relations with the People's Republic of China, with mainland China. In the first months, we not only opened the embassy in in Beijing, but also opened 2 consulates, one in Shanghai, but the first one to open was in Guangzhou, in what used to be called Canton, just north of Hong Kong. And I was assigned there as the consul general. And so my wife had, this was a lucky time to be there because it was very friendly between the 2 countries. Just a few years later, a couple of years later, when the Tiananmen incident took place in China, Tiananmen, our relations soured, and they have never been anything like as friendly since. But those first years, all was sweetness and light. And and meanwhile, my wife had come she had left Hong Kong left her home in North China at age 18 because she married then. And she and her husband went, they were Northern Chinese, but her husband happened to be from a Canton family. And so when the communists came in, they first thought that the communists would stop at the Yangtze River and not do South China. And so she and her husband went down to be with his family in Canton. Only a few months later, the communists took over the whole country. So then they fled to Hong Kong, where she had become a Mandarin teacher at the consulate, and that's how we met. But the rest of her family stayed up north. And so here we were going to China to live, and we were being reunited with her family at the same time. And after all those years, and so that was a very rich experience, and I felt it merited a memoir kind of book. And so I kept a diary and supplemented it with other stuff. And it was not a bestseller, but I felt glad to have done it.
Richard, I've asked a lot of questions, and I think I should probably put myself on mute now and see if anybody else has some questions.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Williams, going back, if we could, just for a second to the trips that you took, going from Chicago to LA on a train is not a 20-minute experience. How did you entertain yourselves?
Well, a big thing was you went back to the club car, which was the last car in the train. And at the back of it was round with windows all around, and with cranks on the windows, you could have the window be clear like our windows are all the time, or if you turned the crank, you could turn it. It was 2 pieces of glass together like this, as I understand it. And if you turned the thing the other way, it would turn the whole glass purple, so you could not be blinded by the sun coming in from outside. And back there, you could play chess with your buddies, or play cards, and I'm sure we brought books along to read and so forth. So you climbed into the upper bunk at night because your parent, you were accompanied by one parent on these trips. My mother always went, and she got the lower berth, so you agilely climbed up.
Thank you.
And it featured things like, well, the one I remember in particular is just when you stopped in Santa Fe, there were Indians there who would come up to the train and try to sell souvenirs, some of which I probably still have, stuff that they made.
There, thank you, Mr. Williams.
Dick.
No, thank you, Dick. Any other questions? I know Edgar's on the call. He's usually good for a few questions. And
I'm at my 50th high school reunion, Wendy, but I have the meeting on.
Okay. So no questions.
What'd you say?
So no questions. Sorry about that, Edgar. Didn't mean to
No,
put you.
I'm glad you mentioned me. I'm happy to be there, but the happy hour and reception has gone on too long. So I'd rather be with you all, but at least I'm following it at a distance.
Thank you, Edgar. Well, let's see. We usually have some good questions. Jack French, I know, is on the call, and he usually comes up with a good one or two. And we have the Bushes. Anybody else have questions? I personally have enjoyed this immensely.
Well, maybe I'll just come in with one more, if I may. Richard, what were some of the skills that the other children had? Yours were mathematics and geography. What were some of the other specialties? I know some of them were really, really good. I was always impressed with the music, how these children at these ages knew the music that they knew, and you had some with perfect pitch who could, the question would be sent in to essentially sing something, but or make the musical. I remember what it was. The scales, certain scales that they would ask the kids to do, and they could do it. It was, fascinating to me.
Yeah, and one program we were asked to invite to make up a poem about the person next to us, and a boy named Jack Lucal, who became a Jesuit later, made up one about a girl named Joan Bishop, who was going to something called, I think, something for adults. At any rate, she was a musician, and he wrote a poem. Joan Bishop is a musical expert. For perfect pitch, she can't be beat. Joan Bishop is an all-round expert when Mr. Kelly turns on the heat. Isn't that funny? Remember that 80 years later. But I can't remember what happened 80 minutes ago. Anyway, Harvey Fishman was specialized in American presidents, which later I discovered one time I was in the Quiz Kids office down in the Loop, and was left alone with whoever I'd been. I went and looked at the books on the shelf, and there was one called American Presidents, and I quickly looked at it, and I went home and bought one, and it had all of Harvey's answers were in this one book that I've been using for years. And but little Ruthie Duskin was very musical, and Joel was very good at math from a very tender age. There was just no particular recipe.
Did most of the parents get along with each other, Richard?
Yes, we did.
Hmm.
Uh, it was mostly the same set of parents. I mean, the ones you got to know particularly well were when we were the four of us were traveling around all those places in the war during the war. Our four well our four mothers were all with us, so they got to know each other very well. And my mother and maybe because Harvey Fisher and I were almost the same age, our mothers were close, and then the two younger kids' mothers also were close, and it was all very friendly.
Did you guys know ahead of time when you had a guest on the show? Occasionally you had, of course, Jack Benny, Fred Allen, and I imagine there were other guests that dropped on the show. Did you guys get a heads up, or did you just showed up the day of the broadcast and oh, I'm hearing so and so's here? How that work
Yeah,
out?
we just showed up on the day, and it was some movie star or personality who happened to be visiting Chicago, so they had gotten word of them and had them come in, but we had no advance notice. And that person would not be a contestant or anything. They might ask a question or two, but they wouldn't and maybe make some kind of statement, but that was all.
What's your memories of Fred Allen?
Oh, Fred Allen was wonderful. We loved that. And we were on his show more than any other. He was broadcasting from New York, and we went to New York, probably 6 or more times through the war years, and were always on his show. So we got to know him and his wife Portland Hoffa and the other people, fairly well that way. And it was all very congenial. They were a wonderful bunch of people.
And what about Joe Kelly? How would you describe Joe Kelly off microphone? Did he ever have a party for the kids at his house? What's your impressions of Joe Kelly?
Yes, he did have a Christmas party. I think it was the first, maybe the first. Anyway, he had at least one Christmas party for us at his home out on the west side of Chicago, and he was very friendly. And he also had a wandering eye, which was known to our parents, but not to us, so that some years later, when he first died, and then his wife Mary died just a few months later, I remember my mother said she didn't want him to be alone up there. But he was. Go ahead.
Talk about your last broadcast. That's a special broadcast. Do you want to tell our audience about the very last time you were on the quiz?
Yes. This was the only time the Quiz Kids ever did this. My birthday is December 28th. And so in 1945, the war now over, I would be 16 on the 28th, and the show was on Sunday, and it happened that meant the broadcast happened to be a day or two before Christmas Day, so it was the Christmas show as well as the goodbye show to me, and they came out to our two-bedroom bungalow in East Chicago and did the broadcast from there. And it was sort of jammed into our living room. They made room for my two aunts as well as, of course, my father and mother. And anyway, I would regularly at the Christmas broadcast every year deliver a Christmas prayer that I had composed, and I'm sure I did that week too. But it was a memorable way to end, very sentimental.
Did your classmate, when you were going to school during the week, did your classmate make a big deal about you being on the radio? Was it just, that's Richard, or were there any problems with that during the years you were on the show?
I was very lucky, I think. I'm not sure it was so congenial for everybody who was on the Quiz Kids, but I had plenty of friends all the time, and in the high school years in particular, I was in both the debate club at the high school, which you got a debate team of two positive and two negative, and you went around and debated in a league in the whole Chicago area of debate teams, and that was a lot of close friends there, and then also acted in the plays that were put on, a drama teacher directed and put on twice a year. I was in some of those. So I was lucky, and I think I had a fuller activity with my fellow high school students than some of the others did.
Frank and Wendy, you want turn it back to you guys, see if you have any last question from the audience. If not, I'll let you go ahead and wrap it up for this part of our show.
Any other questions? Last chance, guys. To unmute and go crazy. And I was rather intrigued by the Columbia University connection. What were you teaching there?
I was teaching graduate level courses in U.S.-China relations, and it was one semester a year, and I'm struggling to remember exactly what I taught, but I think it was basically an account of U.S.-China relations, starting with the nationalists up through the Second World War, and then through the communist period after that. And I also taught a companion course on having to do with Hong Kong, and gosh, my memory is failing me. Hong Kong and the other Chinese appendages, Taiwan and so forth.
I should have some good memory. I am very impressed, especially with the breadth of your life experience, everything you've done. It seems very much like the Renaissance man to me.
An amazing man, really. I have one quick question. Do you find game shows like Jeopardy and other trivia shows to exercise the mind as well as the Quiz Kids game show did?
Well, and we enjoy Jeopardy, and I don't, and anyway, we like the shows, but now it is more as spectators than as participants. So many of the questions are after my time. I just do not have the retention of things that happened in the last 15 or 20 years that I had in earlier days. It's too bad, old age.
Oh, no, I think you're just great. Thank you so much.
You're doing
Oh, my pleasure.
tremendously. We've imposed on you for quite a long time, Dick. And we should probably give you a break because you've been amazing. I mean, my mind is blown by what you have retained. So I wouldn't worry about that on your part. Pop culture isn't necessarily all that interesting anyway. Certainly not as interesting as old time radio, in my humble opinion. But then I am somewhat biased.
Well, thank you all very much. I have enjoyed this.
Oh, well,
No.
thank you. Thank you. It's been wonderful. And I'm sorry for all of the interruptions with people coming in late and all. So, but thank you so much. This has been a tremendous honor to have you and Walden do this presentation. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So, thank you, Walden, too, for making all of this happen and your really thoughtful and interesting questions. You are, so I don't need to tell you what a good interviewer you are. So thank you all, Walden.
By the way, I did invite Richard if he wanted to. He can stay with us for the rest of the program.
Absolutely.
So that's up to you, Richard. I don't know, if you would like to do that or not, but you're welcome to. I don't know if you got my email the other day or not.
I did get it, but I think thank you, but I think I'll have a quick beer instead.
Oh, there you go.
Good for you.
You're probably
Good for
not
you.
the first person to attend this meeting and get a quick beer while they're watching. That's tremendous. So I think we are going to revert to our usual format, and Frank is going to do the first 15 on the March of Time, and let me make you a co-host.
Wendy?
Yes?
Wendy, I thought that we would do the questions, then the first 15, and then the answers.
Okay, that makes more sense to me. I guess I misread the email. And one is amenable. I think I'm the only other person other than Frank who actually has the questions to the quiz. But let me see if I can actually launch the poll. Now that, let's see, polls. Yeah, could you launch the poll? Let me give you hosting privileges, Sally. Make co-host. Will be a pale imitation of Sally and her delivery, but you are now co-host, so you can launch the poll. Okay, let me see. Let me just polls. All right. Can everyone see the poll? Okay, good. All right. The topic is music, music, music times 3 plus 1. Bernard Herrmann composed the music for episodes of many radio programs, such as Suspense, Crime Classics, and the Mercury Theater. He was married at one time to someone with great radio connections. Was it A, Kathleen Haidt, B, Virginia Gregg, C, Louise Fletcher, D, Lillian Bayef. Bernard Herrmann composed the music for episodes of many radio programs, such as Suspense, Crime Classics, and the Mercury Theater. He was married at one time to someone with great radio connections. Was it Kathleen Height, Virginia Gregg, Louise Fletcher, or Lillian Bayef? Question 2. He wrote the music for Broadway Is My Beat and later the theme music for Star Trek. Was it A, Alexander Courage, B, Noel Coward, C, Howard Braverman, D, Leon Lesserman? He wrote the music for Broadway Is My Beat and later the theme music for Star Trek. Was it Alexander Courage, Noel Coward, Howard Braverman, or Leon Lesserman? Question 3. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, paid tribute to the show's musical director in a 5-part story dealing with an Amati violin. He appeared in the story and played the violin. Which storyline was it? A, the Nick Shern matter, B, the Ricardo Amerigo matter, C, the Cui Bono matter, D, the confidential matter? Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, paid tribute to the show's musical director in a 5-part story dealing with an Amati violin. He appeared in the story and played the violin. Which storyline was it? The Nick Shern matter, the Ricardo Amerigo matter, the Cui Bono matter, or the confidential matter? The answer, matters. Number 4. He was a musical director on the George Burns and Gracie Allen show, where he also appeared as a doofus kind of character. He was clearly very talented as he wrote the musical The Music Man. Was he John Scott Trotter, Cy Feuer, Kai Wending, Meredith Wilson? He was a musical director on the George Burns and Gracie Allen show, where he also appeared as a doofus kind of character. He was clearly very talented as he wrote the musical The Music Man. Was he John Scott Trotter, Cy Feuer, Kai Wending, Meredith Wilson? These answers were aimed at Sally. Number 5. He was an Academy Award winner for the score of The Omen and received many other nominations and music awards. On radio, he wrote the score for Frontier Gentlemen. Was he A, Bernard Herrmann, B, Walter Schumann, C, Jerry Goldsmith, D, Bert Kempfert? Frank. He was an Academy Award winner for the score of The Omen and received many other nominations and music awards. On radio, he wrote the score for Frontier Gentlemen. Was he Bernard Herrmann, Walter Schumann, Jerry Goldsmith, Bert Kempfert? Number 6, David Rose followed Ozzie Nelson as the musical director and orchestra leader for the Red Skelton Show. Rose composed and his orchestra performed a song that made it to number 1. Was it Manhattan Spiritual, Wonderland by Night, The Stripper, I Only Have Eyes for You? David Rose followed Ozzie Nelson as the musical director and orchestra leader for the Red Skelton Show. Rose composed and his orchestra performed a song that made it to number 1. Was it Manhattan Spiritual, Wonderland by Night, The Stripper, I Only Have Eyes for You? Number 7, she sang and performed on the radio for many years. She made hits of such songs as You Are My Sunshine, Walking the Floor Over You, and I Can't Give You Anything But Love, Baby. Who was she? Minnie Pearl, Judy Canova, Dinah Shore, Patsy Cline. She sang and performed on the radio for many years. She made hits of such songs as You Are My Sunshine, Walking the Floor Over You, and I Can't Give You Anything But Love, Baby. Who was she? Minnie Pearl, Judy Canova, Dinah Shore, Patsy Cline. Number 8, Walter Schumann wrote the music for the popular police drama Dragnet. What was the name of the song? Ambushes Everywhere, This Is the City, Danger Ahead, Valse Triste. Walter Schumann wrote the music for the popular police drama Dragnet. What was the name of the song? Ambushes Everywhere, This Is the City, Danger Ahead, Valse Triste. Number 9, the Bell Telephone Hour presented some of the best talent to appear on radio during the golden age of radio. Who was the orchestra's primary conductor? Fernando Rosas Fingsthorn,
I'm glad you can read that.
Leopold Stokowski, Donald Voorhees, Semyon Bychkov, Frank. The Bell Telephone Hour presented some of the best talent to appear on radio during the golden age of radio? Who was the orchestra's primary conductor? Fernando Rosas Thingsthorn, Leopold Stokowski, Donald Voorhees, Semyon.
They are real persons, all four of them. And they were all orchestra leaders.
I don't doubt it for a minute. Number 10. There comes a week each month of May when time we should all take to say thanks to those who've been our teachers, much beloved of all God's creatures, especially Sally, for guiding us along our way. May 1st to May 7th was Teacher Appreciation Week. Who was the teacher to whom J. Carroll Nash, as Luigi Basco, should give his thanks? Miss Enright, Miss Spalding, Miss Stevens, Miss Goodwin. May 1st to May 7th was Teacher Appreciation Week. Who was the teacher to whom J. Carroll Nash, as Luigi Basco, should give his thanks? Miss Enright, Miss Spalding, Miss Stevens, Miss Goodwin. That
Wendy,
concludes-
Wendy, before people push the submit button, although there are some names that are misspelled, there is one name that's incorrect and it could confuse people. The question number one, it says Louise Fletcher. The name is actually Lucille Fletcher. At least it is
The
on
first
the poll.
question, that's
The
about
first
Bernard Herrmann.
question, answer C says
Oh,
Louise Fletcher. It should be Lucille Fletcher, but
Okay.
that may confuse people. So,
All right.
and then there's some other misspellings, but it's
Well,
not
look,
critical.
we don't have time to worry about misspellings, but thank you, Edgar. That's
You bet.
very,
You bet.
very helpful. The poll will remain open through the first 15. So if you want to go back and amend questions or answers, you've got an opportunity to do that. Anyway, so I think, Frank, clearly the intention was that Sally was going to struggle with this poll. Well done as always, but let us move on to the
But you did it with
15.
class.
Thank you. Let's see. Here we are, make co-host. All right, Frank, you are officially co-host. And if you want to unmute that, if you can, otherwise ask to unmute. Here we go.
Good. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you,
Very good.
Frank.
Okay. All right, let me get this going here. All right. I've always found various facets of history to be interesting, and OTR produced several programs dramatizing historical events or persons. CBS had a series first called CBS is There, later called You Were There. The Cavalcade of America, Mr. President, Frontier Fighters, That Was the Year, and American Trailer, some others. But I recently came upon the series, The March of Time. It came to radio in 1931 and continued to 1945. In 1931, radio had not developed the newscast format with which we are all familiar. Rather than simply reading the news, the news events were dramatized by writers and presented by actors. And that's what the March of Time did. Dramatize the events of the day or the week that then became history. For example, it dramatized the Hindenburg disaster on the evening it occurred, even though it was a full day later before the emotional report recorded by Herbert Morrison was broadcast. So if you listen to a live broadcast of the March of Time, what you heard was similar to other news broadcasts of the day. But when you're listening to programs today, they are historical dramatizations, just like You Are There and the other shows I mentioned. The program was the creation of broadcasting pioneer Fred Smith and Time magazine executive Roy Larson. As early as 1928, with permission from Time, Smith used material from Time in his broadcasts. That programming evolved into the March of Time. The March of Time began as a weekly half-hour program, highlighting the events of the preceding week. A list of the young actors who appeared on the program resembles a who's who of OTR. Orson Welles, Agnes Moorehead, Nancy Kelly, Jeanette Nolan, John McIntyre, Art Carney, Peter Donald, Edwin Jerome, Kenny Delmar, and Maurice Tarplin all cut their teeth on the March of Time. The show used the narrator to lead into the dramatizations. The longest tenured narrator was Westbrook Van Voorhees. The program used a full orchestra and sound effects team led by Ora Daigle Nichols. She and her husband Arthur had started a sound effects business for radio after years of stage and silent film experience. After Arthur's death in 1931, Mrs. Nichols went on to be known as the First Lady of Sound Effects and was voted as one of the most influential women in radio. If you want to know more about Mrs. Nichols, you can check an old issue of Radio Recall for an article that Jack wrote about her. The half-hour shows required a staff of as many as 75 and 1,000 hours of labor to produce. It was almost shelved after the first year, but audience response led to a rethinking and a continuation of the show. In 1935, the shows were reduced to 15 minutes, but were broadcast nightly with a brutal production schedule. I'm sorry, here's a picture of Mrs. Nichols at the sound effects equipment.
I'm not seeing, have you shared your screen, Frank?
Oh, Lordy. Let's go back and, all right, we're gonna start over again here. Yes, let's hit share screen and share sounds, and we'll be far better off here. All right, now we'll go back into
Maybe make it a full screen.
Yeah.
Perfect, perfect.
now we'll go back and here's the cover of that first Time magazine. And then here's the list of the actors. And I read them, of course, because we have so many people on the phones.
Right.
And then this is Mr. Van Voorhees. He was the narrator. And then this is Mrs. Nichols, chief of the sound effects. All right, now, this was the daily schedule that when they had the 15-minute programs, and there's a specific reason why I have this one. From 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning, the news editor met with the 5 script writers, and they would decide what stories would be chosen for that night's show. Then between 9 and 5, the editor was in touch with the research library at Time magazine to verify names, dates, and background stories to give to the script writers. They would incorporate it into their stories. And then once the scripts were completed, they were mimeographed and made ready by 5 o'clock. Then they were reviewed by the general production manager and Howard Barlow, who was the musical director, because they did have a full orchestra. Then Barlow departs to select the music that would be used, and Pryor assembled the cast, hands out the parts, and they had what they called an undress rehearsal without the orchestra. And from 7 to 7:30, there was a studio conference for the orchestra, the general production manager, and the news editor. Now, a story that broke after 5 p.m. would be written for inclusion in the show. Other stories would be reviewed and shortened. So between 7:30 and 9:35, new scripts were sometimes prepared. From 9:35 to 10:10, there was a dress rehearsal, 15-minute break. Then the cast reassembled to perform the broadcast, which went from 10:30 to 10:45. And you can imagine this went on every day, 5 days a week, while they were doing the 15-minute shows. Go back one here. Here's a picture of the cast, and the one person that I recognize is the person standing there with the script on the right. That's Harry Von Zell. He was an announcer during part of the time, and then the rest is the cast is assembled. Now, the show that I selected for today was the program that production schedule was for. And one of the skits in this episode you're going to listen to was one of those that happened after 5:30. They rewrote it and included it in the show that night. And I'm going to see if what you think, which of the skits was the one that was done late for inclusion. So here's the program. It was from the evening of August 28th, 1935.
The March of Time. On 1,000 fronts, the history of the world moves swiftly forward. 1,000 new facts, new details in the world's history come into being every hour. There is one complete record of this swift-changing civilization.
It is Time, the weekly news magazine.
Time makes it possible for the busy man to read the story of his lifetime as he lives the story of his life. Discover Time. It's on every newsstand. It's the magazine with the red border. Tonight, the editors of Time raise the curtain again on their new kind of reporting of the news. The reenacting of memorable scenes from the news of the world. From the March of Time. Santa Margherita, Italy. Today, as he leaves his Santa Margherita villa, Guglielmo Marconi, inventor of wireless, reveals to the world what took place in a recent interview between himself and Premier Mussolini.
Then you believe, Captain Marconi, that this device can be used in warfare?
Remember, it is not completely perfected, Your Excellency, but my tests have shown that when this wireless ray is directed on an ordinary gasoline engine, the engine will be stopped.
Then it would stop automobile or tank motors from a distance, or stop airplane engines in the air.
Yes. It is based on the wireless wave I have been experimenting on for 25 years, a very short wave, which can be directed like a searchlight.
It would mean that all motorized war machines would be useless, that foot soldiers and cavalry would again be the whole strength of an army.
I believe the ray will also be invaluable in medical treatment. It will rival the X-ray and radium.
Yes, but when will you be able to produce a practical wave machine for our soldiers?
As soon as I can finish it. I am going to resign my captaincy in the Navy immediately and enlist in the Signal Corps.
But why?
To make this invention a practical instrument of war, I must work with it under actual fighting conditions on the field.
Although the world of science considers Marconi too sound a scientist to forecast so sensational an invention prematurely, many doubt the potency of his new shortwave. Today, military experts admitting such a wave possible are devising means of combating it. Time marches on. Toronto, Canada. A strange will probated 9 years ago in Canada haunts the mind of humble husband John Nagel. As outside a ward in a small hospital, he paces up and down impatiently.
Nurse, any news yet?
Not yet, Mr. Nagel, but any moment now. Just try to be patient.
But I can't, nurse. So much depends on this.
Just be calm, Mr. Nagel.
I'll try to be. I'll try to be.
Pacing John Nagel, awaiting the birth of his heir, tries hard to be calm. But his mind goes spinning back 9 years to the will which has now become all important in his family life.
With this, my last will and testament, I, Charles Vance Miller, do hereby give, devise, and bequeath to the Ontario woman who shall have borne the largest number of children by October 31st, 1936, the sum of $500,000. I do bequeath this sum.
Nagel's troubled mind recalls a day when his mounting hopes suddenly dropped. The day when Ontario's Attorney General sounded forth.
The will of Charles Vance Miller should be invalidated by Ontario's legislature. This baby race is almost indecent. But with $500,000 as at stake, the marathon is on.
Back and forth, Nagel paces, his feverish thoughts flying first to the home of Mrs. Bagnato with 6 tallies in 6 years, to the Dion quintuplets, and finally to the odds-on favorite, Mrs. Frances Kenny.
We've got 10 children now. I'm sure to win. Sure, me and my husband are both on relief, but that won't matter. We'll go right on having children every year, and by 1936, we won't ever have to
Mr. Nagel, pacing, hears the hospital door open.
Mr. Nagel. Oh, Mr. Nagel.
Oh, Doctor, what is it?
Congratulations, Mr. Nagel. Everything's fine.
Yes?
It's a girl. A beautiful 8-pound girl.
One girl? Oh, gee, I was hoping for twins. Oh, well, that makes our 10th. Anyway, we've tied the Kennys for first place. Only, of course, Mrs. Kenny's expecting again, and that'll put her ahead once more.
Well...
But we still got till October 31st next year.
Thus, the Ontario Stork Sweepstake enters the home stretch with Mrs. Kenny and Mrs. Nagel tied. And with twins or triplets, the only chance now for an outsider to win. Time marches on. Edmonton, Alberta. Increasingly surprised and dismayed are conservative Canadians and Britons as they learn the significance of this week's election in the province of Alberta. Evangelist school teacher William Aberhart of the Social Credit Party, which won with the slogan of a $25 a month dividend for every citizen, will head, when he takes office next week, the first socialist majority ever elected to a parliament in the British Empire. Newspapers from all over the world clamor for information about the social credit program. What is social credit? To Newshawk's former schoolmaster Aberhart today gives a schoolmaster's explanation.
But where will you get the money, Mr. Aberhart?
Now, you see, it's this way. Really quite similar to the way the processing tax is being collected in the United States. For instance, on a bushel of wheat selling at 60 cents, a 5-cent tax will be collected. On flour selling at $1.10, another 10 cents will be collected. On 50 loaves of bread made from the same bushel of wheat, 50 cents will be collected. In that way, the consumer pays only 1 cent a loaf, but in reality is paying the tax painlessly, which will be his dividend of $25 a month.
But if people only pay a few cents a month in tax, how can you pay them $25 in dividends?
Quite simple. You see, with everybody's purchasing power increasing by dividends, they will buy more of everything, production will shoot up, and so there will be more and more products to tax.
My paper reports that unemployed families and bums are rushing into Alberta from all over Canada.
Naturally, persons who refuse to work will get nothing. No work, no dividend. Only persons who have lived in Alberta a year will be eligible for the guarantee. I am sure social credit is going to work. I am bringing economists from England who have it all worked out. A brain trust, just like President Roosevelt's.
As Alberta's Aberhart tries to make clear his objectives, push forward work on plans for social credit, rich Albertans are already moving their money to other provinces. What will be the fate of social credit? If Canada's courts declare it unconstitutional, it will be worthless. But if it is put into effect, it may throw the 450,000 citizens of Canada's province of Alberta into complete economic isolation from the rest of the world. Time marches on. Death Valley, California. Driving along a desolate road down through Death Valley, John Backert and his elder daughter approached the spot from which 2 days before they had gone for help, leaving Mrs. Backert and 12-year-old daughter Agnes in a broken-down, stranded automobile.
Here's the car, all right.
I don't see Mother or Agnes around.
They must be resting inside after 2 days. Here we are.
Mother, we're here. Mother.
They're not here. What could have happened?
Father, here's a note. It's from Mother. She says it's 5 p.m. Sunday. We can't wait any longer. Starting on foot for Granite Wells.
Well, that's funny. We've just come from there, and we never saw a sign of them along the way.
Father, it means they've gone off the road. They're lost in the desert.
Far from their disabled car, wandering through a wilderness of strange cactus growths, huge boulders and powder-dry alkali flats, with only a blanket to protect them from the burning sun, are Mrs. Backert and her 12-year-old daughter Agnes.
Mother, I'm awful thirsty. Will we get there pretty soon?
Yes, Agnes. I think we will. Pretty soon. We've been walking a long time now.
Oh, I know. Is that what we're heading for? That brown-looking little hill over there?
Uh-huh. That's where we're going. That's where Granite Wells ought to be. Right near that little hill.
Well, don't you know that that's where it is?
Why, of course Mother knows, Agnes. That's where it is. But we mustn't hurry, though. We'll get too tired.
Too tired for what, Mother?
Agnes, look at that rock.
It is a funny-looking one, isn't it? Like that one we saw this morning. Why, Mother, here are some footprints. Well, somebody else must have been by here, too.
No, Agnes. I'm afraid those are our footprints.
Oh, then it's the same rock. Well, Mother, that means we'll have to start all over again, doesn't it?
Yes. We'll have to start all over again.
Hour after hour goes by. Night falls, but brings no relief from the oppressive heat of Death Valley to Agnes Backert and her mother. Always hoping that the next hill will bring them to a settlement, their one stale loaf of bread is soon gone. Days pass, and the burning sun dries up the few remaining puddles of muddy water. And still the long waste stretching ahead to the horizon seems to have no end. It is morning of the 4th day.
When are we going to start again, Mother? We've got to find food and water pretty soon.
Agnes, Mother can't go any further. Not now. Maybe if I lie here a little while.
Well, Mommy, perhaps if I went ahead, I could find a house or something.
No, Agnes. You stay here. If we stay in one place, someone may find us.
Mommy, I'm afraid.
Oh, don't be afraid. Somebody'll come.
Oh, listen. Listen, Mommy. It's an airplane. Oh, give me the blanket. Quick, Mommy. I'll wave it at them.
Yes,
Maybe.
somebody will come.
Oh, it's no use. They didn't see it. Mother, what's the matter? Wake up, Mommy. Look, Mommy. I'm still waving it. They haven't gone away yet. Mommy, they've seen us. They're coming back. Oh, Mother, wake up. They see us.
The rescue planes guide a party of horsemen to the spot, and Mrs. Backert, hurried to a hospital today, revives. Thus, the courage of a 12-year-old girl cheats Death Valley of adding 2 more victims to its long, ever-mounting list. Time marches on. You have just listened to The March of Time, the reenacting of memorable scenes from the news of the world. Presented to you by the editors of Time, the weekly news magazine.
This week, on the screens of thousands of theaters from coast to coast, the new 5th issue of The March of Time on the Screen is being shown. That audiences and critics can find each succeeding issue of this new screen feature better, more important, more stirring than the last, the latest, the 5th issue, best of all, is gratifying indeed to its producers. In The March of Time on the Screen, you will find informative, exciting pictures, drawn from the politics, the romance, the people, the adventure, the fighting that is going on in the world today. Living portraits out of the parade of life, of the things that can best be told in pictures. The March of Time is now being distributed by RKO. In the past month, more than 1,000 new theaters have contracted to bring this new moving picture feature to their screens. Ask the manager of your theater for the date each month when the new issue of The March of Time will be shown.
Again tomorrow night at this time, and every night, Monday through Friday each week, The March of Time on the air. Time marches on. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.
Okay, can you hear me? I cut myself. You can. Okay, good. Well,
Yes.
if you had a chance now, think about which of those skits was installed at the last minute. I'll give you a few seconds to think about which one it might be. Because, all right. Okay. What are we doing here? There we go. Yep, that's the one. It was the story about the father who was in the waiting room for the child to be born. And, you know, because I thought it was so unusual, I had to do some looking into it. And I know I'm going a little beyond the first 15, but in Canada, they called it the Great Stork Race. And it was the will of Charles Millar that provided $500,000 would be awarded to the family of Toronto who produced the most children in the 10 years following his death. At the end of the 10 years, 6 women had died, giving birth to 9 children during the 10 years. Of course, everything else, it ended up in court. And 2 of the women were disqualified because 5 of her children were illegitimate, 1 because 4 of hers were stillbirths. But the 4 winners were each awarded a sum which today is the equivalent of $2 million. And yes, the winners included that Nagel family that was dramatized in the show. Now, the women who were disqualified, excuse me, gave up their right to appeal the court's decision, and they received a sum which is equivalent to about $200,000 today. So that's still not too bad. Here's a picture of the 4 women who were the winners. Now, interestingly enough, one of the women, not only had the 9 during the 10 years, but she had 7 other children. So she had 16 children altogether. And this, though, I thought was really funny. The mother of 16 children now believes in birth control. So it just struck me as funny. Now, Millar also had a sense of humor. In addition to the baby contest, his will also created a vacation estate in Jamaica that he gave to 3 men who detested each other, but they only got it if they lived there together indefinitely. He also gave brewery stocks to a group of teetotaling Protestant ministers, provided they participated in the operations of the brewery and accepted the dividends. So the guy had a sense of humor, but he also had a lot of money. So while the March of Time was a current events program when it was broadcast, as I listen to it now, they represent an interesting perspective on the history of the era. My only regret is that of all the shows, there's probably only a dozen or 2 in existence, so that, I'd like to listen to a lot more. So there you are, the March of Time.
Thank you so much, Frank. That was just really wonderful. And it makes me want to go and dig up some other episodes and listen to them. So that
Yeah, there's some great half-hour episodes that exist. And of course, during World War II and leading up to World War II, you have people doing imitations of Mussolini and Hitler and the like. And these are all, again, those actors that I named. They obviously were really good at what they did and went on to careers, I mean, that lasted long after the March of Time shows that they did.
Does anyone have any questions for Frank or observations on the first 15?
I got a question.
Yes,
Are the March of Time movies have any relation to the radio show?
Yeah, you might have heard the promo at the end of the show. They did. Time magazine found us to be so successful that they put together a once a month a newsreel that was shown in the theaters. Again, between double features or leading up to the first show. But yes, March of Time was that program or came from that program.
Did it have the same staff and people behind it?
For the production, yes. I don't know that they had the actors because I think they used a lot of, excuse me, they didn't recreate in that sense. They actually had film of the events that were in it. And as I say, it was only a monthly, so they had time to put it together to get the film and to splice it and get it out to the theaters.
Well, good research as always, Frank. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really delightful. So now we have the quiz answers. So I will try to go into Sally mode. I'm a pale substitute for that. But I've got the questions here on the screen and the results. So we will see how this all plays out. All right, then, let's do that. That's a little better. That way you don't get me completely in profile, just in shadow. All right. So, question 1. Bernard Herrmann composed the music for episodes of many radio programs, such as Suspense, Crime Classics, and the Mercury Theater. He was married at one time to someone with great radio connections. Was it Kathleen Haidt? Only one of you thought that was the right answer. Virginia Gregg? 5 of you thought that that was the answer. Louise, AKA Lucille Fletcher? 7 went for that one. That was 47% of the answers on the quiz, and Lillian Baeff got 2. So the correct answer, as the majority voted, was Lucille Fletcher for question number 1. Let's see, let me just move this up. He wrote the music for Broadway Is My Beat, and later the theme music for Star Trek. Was it Alexander Courage? You all were split. We were split between Alexander Courage, who got 9 votes, and Howard Braverman, who got 6. And the correct answer is Alexander Courage. We haven't fooled the majority of you yet. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, paid tribute to the show's musical director in a 5-part story dealing with an Amati violin. He appeared in the story and played the violin. Which storyline was it? Nobody went for the Nick Shern matter. 10 went for the Ricardo Amerigo matter. 3 went for the cui bono matter, and D, 2 went for the confidential matter. And again, you all are sharp tonight. The correct answer is the Ricardo Amerigo matter. I'm sure John Abbott got that answer right. Question number 4, he was a musical director on the George Burns and Gracie Allen show, where he also appeared as a doofus kind of character. He was clearly very talented as he wrote The Music Man. Was he, let's see, nobody, only one person was fooled by these answers. No one thought it was John Scott Trotter or Cy Feuer. One person thought it was Kay Wending, and 14 thought it was Meredith Wilson. Sidebar, it was the first Broadway musical I ever saw at age 9 with the original cast. It was fabulous. The Music Man, that is. Number 5, he was an Academy Award winner for the score of The Omen and received many other nominations and music awards. On radio, he wrote the score for Frontier Gentlemen. Now this one had a little bit of a spread. 2 people thought it was Bernard Herrmann. 2 people thought it was Walter Schumann. 9 people thought it was Jerry Goldsmith. And 2 people thought it was Bert Kempfert. And once again, the majority got the right answer. It was Jerry Goldsmith. Of course, they were all fine composers. Number 6, David Rose followed Ozzie Nelson as the music director and orchestra leader for the Red Skelton Show. Rose composed, and his orchestra performed a song that made it to number 1. Was it Manhattan Spiritual? No one seems to have agreed with that one. Wonderland by Night? 2 of you thought it was that. 11 thought it was The Stripper, which was a title that I thought sounded kind of fun. And the 11 of you went for that one. And 2 went for I Only Have Eyes for You. And once again, The Stripper was the correct answer. That just opens up many images for me. Anyway, number 7. She sang and performed on the radio many years. She made hits of such songs as You Are My Sunshine, Walking the Floor Over You, and I Can't Give You Anything But Love, Baby. Who was she? Nobody thought it was Minnie Pearl. 3 people thought it might be Judy Canova. 10 people thought it was Dinah Shore. And 2 people thought it was Patsy Cline. And for the first time this evening, the majority was wrong. The correct answer, which 3 of you got, was Judy Canova. Congratulations, guys. Looks to me like Rebecca got that one right. Number 8. Walter Schumann wrote the music for the popular police drama Dragnet. What was the name of the song? Nobody thought it was Ambushes Everywhere. 7 people thought it was This Is the City. 6 people thought it was Danger Ahead. And 2 people thought it was Waltz Triste. The correct answer, and this was a kind of a close race, was C, Danger Ahead. And I have an extra note here. Ambushes Everywhere was for Terry and the Pirates. This is the City, no such song. So, but it sounded credible. And Valse Triste was I Love a Mystery. So there you have it. The correct answer is C. You know, the majority was on a roll there for a while, but not right now. Number 9. The Bell Telephone Hour presented some of the best talent to appear on radio during the golden age of radio. Who was the orchestra's primary conductor? Nobody thought it was A, Fernando Rosas Thingsthorn. 7 people thought it was Leopold Stokowski. 8 people thought it was Donald Voorhees, and no one thought it was Semyon Unpronounceable. The correct answer was Donald Voorhees. So the majority got it. They've gained back their lead here. So we'll see how they do on number 10. May 1st to May 7th was Teacher Appreciation Week. Who was the teacher to whom J. Carroll Nash, as Luigi Bosco, should give his thanks? Nobody thought it was Miss Enright from our Miss Brooks. 11 thought it was Miss Spaulding. 1 thought it was Miss Stevens, and that was my favorite on the list. And 3 people thought it was Miss Goodwin. I keep wishing that the one person got it right. However, the correct answer did not fool the majority this time. It was Miss Spaulding. So hats off to this very, very astute collection of people tonight with the clue. And that finishes the quiz. Thank you very much, Frank, for putting it together. And I know you were just looking forward to see poor Sally struggle with those names. But she tricked you. All right. So that concludes the quiz answers. So now we will try to chug through the business part of the meeting. Let me stop the recording.